Right, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are, everybody. This is the second one of these videos, and this one is on painting World War One wooden propellers. Mainly doing this because I've had an absolute nightmare in the past doing them myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through the process that I use. It works relatively well, it's fairly straightforward, fairly simple, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Now, one of the things that you need to be aware of here is that the British and the Germans had two completely different ways of painting propellers, or not painting them, but assembling or the materials that they used. So RAF and Royal Flying Corps propellers generally were a very, very dark wood. It looks something like oak. They're still laminated, but the laminate isn't very easy to see, which makes RFC propellers fairly easy to paint, to be perfectly honest. With the German propellers, it's a little bit more tricky because the materials were cheaper wood and you can really see the laminations in the propeller. So therefore, it is a much more time-consuming way of doing it. Unfortunately, German aircraft are also a lot more colourful, so therefore people are more interested in painting them. So, what do we actually need so that we can do this? Right, well, if you're going to be doing an RFC propeller, all you need is Tamiya XF60 dark yellow, a little bit of raw umber oil paint, which I've left on there for about an hour, and as you can just see, there's a sort of a halo around the oil. What's happened there is I left that on there so it's leaching some of the linseed oil out of the oil paint. That's vital because it is going to take a lot less time to dry if you let a lot of the oil separate. Okay. Yeah, you can use kitchen towel as well, but I like to use a little bit of cardboard. It works just as well. Yeah. Okay. A couple of sponges.
Kitchen sponges?
I'll show you just normal kitchen sponges. These come from a sponge scourer, about 40p from Tesco's. Something to mount the propeller on is a good idea. So what I've got here is barbecue stick with a little bit of blue tack, not gone over the top here. Fairly straightforward stuff. Just something so you've got something to hold on to. Particularly as you're working with the oil paint, it gets quite messy. Okay, so that's what we need. That's what we use when we're doing the Royal Flying Corps propellers. Really straightforward. So the first thing you do, and what I've done is I've prepared this one. I've sprayed it a base coat of dark yellow matte. Okay, you don't need to do any more than this. That is it. Just spray it dark yellow matte. Leave it for at least a day to dry. So long as you leave it for about a day to dry, that way the oil isn't going to try and start to strip the paint off of the propeller. All of these propellers came from the Wingnut Wings Faust that I had. Basically, Wingnut Wings supply 4 different propellers for the Mercedes D3 engine, and used the one in the kit, and I thought might as well use these for something else. Okay, so what do we do? We've got that like that. It's quite simple, really. What we do is we take a brush, normal paint brush like so. Take a little bit of paint, and we quite liberally paint it onto the wood. Simple as that. I'm just going to do one side here because I'm going to demonstrate this again later for an online meeting. But all we do is we just keep painting it and just nicely cover the entire propeller blade with the dark umber, or with a raw umber, like so. Okay, then once you've done that, you just leave that for a little while. It doesn't matter how, as long as you've got it on there nice and thick. And then what I tend to do is I tend to just run the sponge down there like that, and you get that sort of wood grain look. You can just about pick that out from there. Okay, and when you've got that little wood grain look, you can do that. Now the thing is, if you're not happy with that, or you think you've overdone it, a little bit of white spirit, a little bit of thinners, anything like that you can use for oil paints, you can strip it off and you can start again. Now, next thing you got to do, once you've done that, as I say, you can really see it is that simple. You don't need to do any more than that. Just leave it to dry. The problem is drying time. Generally, even if you've left it to do like that, you're going to be leaving that propeller for at least 2 days. At least 2 days. Reason being that oil paints take a very, very long time to dry. Really, really straightforward to use, but they do take a long time to dry. You can speed it up by spraying it with a gloss varnish or something along those lines, but generally that's all you need to do. It's really, really straightforward, and you can leave it. In some cases, the Royal Flying Corps actually put brass tips on their propeller. It's a good idea, paint the brass tips first and then do your wood grain up to the brass tips. You can then clean it off of the brass tip area, and you can leave it like that. As I say, just leave it like that and away you go. It's absolutely foolproof. It's really, really straightforward. Takes no time at all. Once that's dry, you can then pick out your propeller boss and the mounting area on the propeller there, quite simply, just with a little bit of steel paint or something along those lines, just to bring the detail out on that. Again, some of the German aircraft, they actually have a spinner, so that's entirely up to you whether you want to paint that or not. But with British aircraft, generally they didn't have a spinner, and you're going to be seeing that. Okay, which then brings me on to German aircraft. Little bit more complicated. So what tools and equipment do we need for that? Right, well, again, your Tamiya Dark Yellow, always a good base coat. You like to use a brushable brown paint, and the one that works for me generally is Life Colour Flesh No. 2 Shadow that came out of a Flesh set. But any good quality brushable sort of red-brown paint is a good call on there. And Tamiya Clear Orange X26. That will become evident as we go through. Okay. It's also a good idea to have your trusty airbrush, okay, and a good sharp pencil. Reason being that you're going to need to draw the laminations on before you start. Okay. A nice, good, easy detail brush as well, something where you can work fairly close in. Not too many problems at all. Again, with Life Colour, I quite like it because you can paint that pretty much straight from the pot. It doesn't need a great deal of thinning. If you're going to use some of the others, you've got to thin them a little bit to start with. Okay, so how do we do it? Well, the first thing that we do is once we've done our base coat, we then actually draw with a pencil the lamination lines on the propeller. As you might be able to see from there, you can just about see the lines that I've drawn. Okay, about 4 or 5, nice and straightforward, easy to do. And once you've done that, you've then got a guide so you can paint in the darker wood. So the light wood is going to be the lighter of the laminations. The darker cut brown is going to be the darker of the laminations. Okay, so doing that, it's quite simple. At this point, unfortunately, I do have to wear a magnifier for the simple reason that my eyes are knackered. Right, okay. So, opening our Life Colour, give it a good shake to start with. Opening our Life Colour. Okay, a little bit of water. So, just load the brush up, like so. Follow your line. It's good to have a steady hand here. Now, what you can see is the top of these propellers are actually flat. So your first lamination is going to be fairly easy to pick out because all you need to do is just run along the flat, which keeps it nice and simple. So just running along the flat, along the top there like so. Bringing it around the other side. Now bear in mind that these are usually about 1 inch thick. So scale thickness does come into this here. In some cases you might need to do more than one coat, in some cases you might not. I don't mind the Life Colour for that reason. Again, don't worry about going over onto the propeller boss at this point because you're going to be painting that later. And I've just gone along there like so. Nice steady hand. bring it around that side, like so. And there we have it. We have got our propeller. Now do bear in mind, if I bring that round here, I haven't done this on the other side because we'd be here all night, but you're gonna need to also come down the back edge of the propeller the same. So that's the first lamination in place, nice and simple. And then what we do is we just go again. Now you need to alternate, so you need to leave that one light, so the next one you bring out is going to come in at around about here. And as you can see, I'm just going to go along here like so. It's a good idea, just go down your edges to start with, then you can block it in afterwards, and try and keep your brush nice and steady as you possibly can.
Keep your brush moving.
Okay.
It's not a good idea to stop with a brush.
Yeah, keep the brush moving.
Get a smoother line.
And try and rest your hand on something as well. That works for me. That way it takes some of the shakiness out of it. Oh, we're going a little bit heavy with the paint there. So what we might need to do is we might need to go and touch that up afterwards. Okay, so that's our next one. So let's just bring that around there. And so I've gone a little bit heavy there. What I'd normally do is afterwards I'd either rub that down a little bit, or I would go over it again with the dark yellow just to touch that in. Okay, so then we go down to the next one. Okay, and that's going to take over from here. So we've got a bit too much paint on the brush there. Okay. So just run that along there like so. And then turn the propeller around a little bit. And we're just going to run it down like so. Okay. I'm then going to block in any colour as I need to. Like so. Then the other side is an exact repeat again. So starting about here. Now bear in mind again, as I say, normally we would be working underneath the propeller. So what I'd normally do is I would actually have the line going that way as well. Get the paint on that, loaded on there properly. And again, just running that down there like so. Now some of these propellers have got a lot more curve to them and a lot more bite on them. If they have got a bit more bite than that, you're going to have to bring the line round very much like I've done there. And it really is a case of look at propellers. There's plenty of them on the internet. Have a look, see what suits you, what suits the model that you're actually making, what sort of propeller it had. All of those things are absolutely vital. Then the final one, which is down here. Oh, again, I've just got a little bit too much paint on there. And just bring that along there. And after that, what you do is you just touch up any areas that you might have gone a little bit harsh with or a little bit heavy on. And there we go. That's painted like that. Give that about 5 or so minutes to dry. I'm not going to be doing that today for the simple reason that I don't want to be spending too much of your time here. But usually give that a good half an hour, something like that, to dry. Because it's a quick drying acrylic, it will dry nice and quickly. And then, as you can see, there's quite a bit of contrast there, and it doesn't look overly varnished. So what we do to give it that varnished look is we're going to give it a spray over with Tamiya Clear Orange, and that's going to bring out the sort of the wood grain look in the propeller itself. Nice and straightforward, very, very easy to do this. Now this I have thinned with Gunze Mr. Leveling Thinner, and I generally thin my Tamiya paints before I actually use them, so the whole thing's been thinned rather than thinning it in the cup or anything else, mainly because I can also brush this quite successful with Mr. Leveling Thinner.
So what sort of ratio roughly?
Generally ratio is around about 60-40, 60% paint, 40% thinner.
Okay.
What I generally do is I take it up to about halfway up the threads on the paint pot itself with the thinner, then give it a good stir and a good shake, and I'm usually there or thereabouts. Okay, and that means I can also quite successfully brush paint that as well. So just turn the compressor on a minute. Okay, get a bit of the paint.
Which
Load it up.
airbrush are we using?
I'm using the Top Notch Pro one on this occasion. Okay, that's probably enough paint for what I'm going to need there. There's not a lot in there. It doesn't need to be a lot. I'm only covering a propeller. I'm not covering lots and lots and lots of area. You know, a bottle of Tamiya Clear Orange will probably go off before you've used it all, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so just pull the airbrush out there, it's just got a bit stuck. Okay, and all we do is like so, and that is that. It is that straightforward. By all means, please take more time than I did on the brush painting section, because it does take some time to get used to brush painting these quite successfully, but when you do, that's the kind of result that you can expect. And as you can see, that orange has brought out the lighter yellow a little bit more successfully, and as a result that sort of gives it a sort of nice deep shine as well. Let's just turn the compressor off for a moment. Okay, so that is literally it. It is that simple. There's not a great deal to it. It's all about practice, taking a bit of time on this, and you will be rewarded with a propeller that looks something like that. Okay, so that was that one. It's a fairly short tutorial this week, but it's fairly straightforward on painting World War I propellers.